Mercury Saturn is a very interesting combination astrologically speaking. Mercury has to do with our words, and Saturn has to do with the material world. Therefore, Mercury Saturn largely has to do with how our thoughts become things. And for a Mercury Saturn person, their thoughts very often become things. But we have to analyze the quality of thoughts the Mercury Saturn person is thinking. Saturn, as we know, is the god of burdens and responsibilities and realizing what our duty is to the world around us. And Mercury has to do with our overall thought process, how we think about the world, but also how we think about ourselves. Therefore, the Mercury-Saturn combination is a combination that can oftentimes feel like we think about ourselves in a way that is heavy and dreary and burdensome. When we have Mercury and Saturn in hard aspect combination, we tend to see the rain cloud far sooner than we see the silver lining. And there's a very great level of importance in doing that, because when we see the rain cloud, it allows us to have a very pragmatic and a very practical approach to how we're going to organize our efforts on that specific day. However, because we tend to organize our efforts around the fact that we've seen the rain cloud, we don't realize that there is a larger, brighter sky around us and that there might only be one rain cloud in the sky on that day. When we have Mercury and Saturn in hard aspect combination within our charts, that one rain cloud can overcast our entire perception and it can block us from seeing the sun that's still shining. So very often the Mercury-Saturn person is always prepared for the next shoe to drop or prepared for the worst thing that can possibly happen, but sometimes that level of preparation isn't necessary. One of the issues with Mercury-Saturn is that the Mercury-Saturn person also wants to communicate to others their findings. However, the findings that the Mercury-Saturn person wants to communicate tends to circulate around a problem. And therefore, the Mercury-Saturn person may be a wonderful troubleshooter, but they're also the person who tends to start the conversation with the words, "the problem is." When a person is starting a conversation with the words, "the problem is," more often than not, it can cause us to feel a little bit exhausted of that person because it causes us to feel as if that person only has bad news to share with us. So the Mercury-Saturn person can oftentimes be dubbed the Debbie Downer, or the person who's raining on everybody else's parade, because whereas everybody else sees a wonderful day to go on a marathon, the Mercury-Saturn is the only person who's talking about the 10% chance that it might rain. Now, I know that a lot of this is sounding very heavy for those of us who have Mercury-Saturn, and truthfully, it is quite heavy for those of us who have Mercury-Saturn, but the reality is that the Mercury-Saturn person wants to be useful. And one of the ways that they know how to be useful is by pointing out the potholes that exist in the world for others around them. Mercury-Saturn is probably one of the most powerful combinations that we can have to Mercury, because once again, Mercury is representing our thoughts and Saturn is representing our things. So Mercury and Saturn is representing the moment of connection where our thoughts change from something that exists within our minds to something that exists within our reality. And because Saturn is the father of melancholy and also the god of depression, sometimes when we have Mercury and Saturn in hard aspect combination, our thoughts tend to be thoughts that make us feel a little bit more melancholy, depressed, heavier, and overburdened by the responsibilities of life. And because we tend to say those same things to ourselves in our mind, the Mercury-Saturn person can have a means of manifesting those internal heavy realities in the larger reality of the life that they're living. Because when we have Mercury and Saturn, the universe doesn't know the difference between the thought that you're thinking and the reality that you live, which is a powerful tool of manifestation, which causes Mercury-Saturn people to be powerful manifestors in general. There is a story in the Bible about this man who was able to either curse or bless anybody simply by the power of his words. And chances are that guy had Mercury Saturn. Because when we have Mercury Saturn, as we say it, so too shall it be. Therefore, as a Mercury Saturn person, instead of reiterating to ourselves this tape of depression and heaviness and responsibility and burden and having to abide by the rules all the time, and this idea that everybody else gets away free in life except for us, we should start to plant seeds within ourselves of positivity. We should start to change the messaging that we share with ourselves and with the world around us to messages of hope and messages of freedom and messages of personal self-love, but also of universal kindness. Because, once again, as a Mercury Saturn person, you are one of the most powerful manifestors that exists astrologically. And as a result of that, you should use the power of your tongue to speak life into action, or to speak words into being, to actually speak words into being that are of a positive and uplifting nature, because as a Mercury Saturn person, anything that you think and anything that you say has far more momentum behind it than most of what other people around you think or say within this lifetime. Mercury Saturn is also a wonderful combination for people who are doing any sort of prolonged writing project or prolonged research project, because Mercury and Saturn is the combination that allows us to meditate our efforts and bring together the scattered powers of our mind towards one specific point of focus, which allows us to also fulfill our greatest work within this lifetime. So if you're a Mercury Saturn person, meditation is something that you can do and pick up easily, because you already have a mind that knows how to crystallize itself around a singular focal point. And also, you can take this natural power that you have and invest that into anything that you're doing within this lifetime, which is another reason why Mercury Saturn people have the wherewithal and the longevity within themselves and within their efforts to accomplish great things within this world.